Welcome back to Peak City Gym, the premier fitness over 40 resource here in Apex, North Carolina. On our podcast, we talk about fitness, health, specifically tailored for adults over 40. My name is Keegan Hanks. Today, I'm with
CJ Schmelzer.
Shane Rabideau.
Brendan Rabideau.
So what has been going on with everybody's lives this week? Any fun things that y'all have done? Any interesting activities y'all been up to?
I wouldn't necessarily say that this was a fun activity, but I did go fishing a couple days ago. It wasn't actually for fish. It was literally for my keys after my 2.5-year-old threw them in a hole filled with water. And it was just an interesting start to the day for sure, because we go to the park. We go to the same park every time. She wanted to go onto the baseball field and run around in open space. I thought, what trouble could happen there? And we're doing airplane, so I'm running around with her on my back and everything. And we're doing crash landings and tumbling. And at one point, my keys fell out of my little kangaroo pouch on my sweatshirt. And she grabbed my keys, which I don't think anything of because she does that. She loves grabbing the keys and driving. And anyway, she immediately threw them and said, "Bye-bye, keys, all gone." And I heard the plunk of them hitting in water, but I had not seen any holes anywhere on the field or anything. And sure enough, yeah, those keys were bye-bye. They were all gone. And I shoved my whole arm in the hole trying to fish these out. Couldn't reach the bottom. There's red ants. I still have some bites on my hands and everything. And meanwhile, she's taunting me down in the squatted position. "Daddy, find it? Daddy, where's the keys?" And I'm like, trying not to lose my mind. Anyway, I tried to grab a big stick. I put that in the hole with my arm, lost the stick, so I knew that the keys were gone at that point. And I had to call my wife, who was at work, get her to come pick me up. And when she showed up, she also saw that I ruined an outfit that she had told me to please not get stains on. As she texted me that, and I said, "No problem," Brindley proceeded to look over at me and dump the rest of her chocolate milk on her as she forgot to put that back in the upright position. So it was a real parenting fail Wednesday for me. Or as Keegan said, a babysitting fail, and got chastised by an entire class of our moms.
Oh, yeah. No.
To be fair, I'm not a dad yet, so it is always babysitting for me.
Well, you learned an important lesson in parenting, and the first thing is never say babysitting.
I don't know. I feel like that's like a solid B- like parenting day, and that's like you're never above like a B+. So
Well, I mean, honestly, she was still like, "Oh, thank you, Daddy," during the time. And I mean, she's back to being sweet, and I'm just like, oh my God, like, how did this just happen? We still went and got ice cream and all that stuff. So it turned out to be a good day. And honestly, if that's the worst that happens, it's not that big. But it did require a certain amount of strength, and I know that that's what we're about to talk about today. So
phenomenal
physical
segue.
Strength and restraining myself, mental strength, and not flipping out.
A lot of mental strength to keep yourself cool, losing all of your keys.
Yeah,
not just car keys,
all of them
but
are gone.
Everything.
And no, they were not recovered. So
now we're about to go through the keys to strength.
Yeah,
right?
Perfect. Wow,
Great.
What a segue.
All right.
Brendan's not going to say anything the rest of the podcast.
Oh, I'm done.
Like, all right, guys, see ya.
I'm done. We're out of here. Anyone else do anything fun this week?
Well,
Pretty average week. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, now that Halloween's over and Thanksgiving's on the way, I mean, of course, we set up our Christmas tree already. So
Okay, love that.
And that was always
good.
fun getting to do that. But yeah, it's thanks. Appreciate that.
It's
a little on the
family
early
life.
side, but it's never too early to start being in the holiday spirit.
Come on, Grinch. This week, I reverse seared a steak on a smoker. So I took like really thick steaks, probably 1.5 inch thick steaks, and I salted them, kind of like dry brine them for a little bit, and then threw them on my Traeger and let them just on the super smoke, like I think it was 180 degrees for like 40 minutes, and just let those smoke. And then once they were done, cooked all the way through to, I prefer medium rare. Once they were cooked all the way through, I took them out and then just like seared them on a hot pan. And I didn't tell Carrie what meat I was making or what I was making, and I just cut off a little bit of it and I gave it to her. And it was a little bit more of a fatty bit, but she looked at me and she's like, "We're having bacon for dinner?" I was like, "No, that's steak." And she was like, "Oh my God, this is incredible." It just tastes really good. And so if anyone has a smoker, I highly recommend reverse searing on a smoker for your steak. It is incredible. Yeah. One after the like 5 hours I spent cleaning it and like getting it ready to work, I love it now. It's super easy. You just put some pellets in there and set your temp. But
I also love it because he brought some in when you guys weren't here and I ate some. So it's awesome.
yeah,
Some of the steak?
yeah.
Dude, what's going on?
It was 2 days ago. It wouldn't be good by now. But it was fantastic. One thing that we do want to open up to you guys is questions about the name of this podcast. We really want to put a lot of effort and make it personable and relatable for you. So we want to open it up to our listeners for what you think our name should be, what resonates more with you, what you feel like would kind of speak more to what this podcast is about for you. So first couple of names that we've come up with is Built to Last, Unracked Becoming an Ageless Athlete, Living Longer with Peak City Gym, Longevity Lab, and Peak Longevity Project. Now, these are not the final names or the only 5 that we like, but we just want to open those up to you guys and see what you think, if there's any other ideas that you may have, or what your favorites of these 5 are.
Yeah, I'd say if they want to comment, we can also throw in a raffle for the comments to add a little incentive. So we get a lot of our apparel through a company called Markful. That's where we get like even this pullover and some other stuff in there. So we will give a $50 Markful gift card to one of the people who comments their favorite name for the podcast in the comments section here. So make sure you comment, and then you'll get some cool Peak City Gym swag.
Just make sure you put some effort into it. Don't just be commenting anything.
Yeah. You can't say pizza. It's got to be more than that. I haven't really spoken to you two about any of these names. Do you guys have one that you like the most or kind of speaks to what you think?
Do you have them? Which one was it? I liked the first 2. I thought were pretty good.
Built to Last.
Yeah, I thought Unracked was a cool little, what do you call it? Play on words.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like the Built to Last, and I like the Longevity Lab, honestly.
Mm-hmm. In today's conversation, we're going to highlight some of the lesser known benefits of strength and resistance training. The idea of strength and resistance training has really become very popular with the advent of social media, which has been amazing for us, but also really frustrating at times, especially with adults over 40, because there's so many conflicting advices out there and so many honestly just bad advice out there. And we want to clarify those misconceptions, provide points of practical application to expedite your progress in the gym. So let's take a look at a short video from one of the leading experts in the longevity field, Dr. Gabrielle Leon. So I'll actually pull that up for us to watch together.
One participant of this study that I worked on, I absolutely fell in love with her. We'll just call her Betty. Big brown eyes, great personality, a mom of 3. She had always done exactly what you are saying. She ate less. She exercised more. This is what we told her. Over the years, she'd done a million different fad diets. And in the process, she lost her muscle. I went to image her brain, and her brain looked like the beginning of an Alzheimer's brain. And I realized that she had done exactly the advice that we had given her. And I thought about the patients that I was seeing in the nursing home, and I realized that the one thing they all had in common wasn't a body weight problem. It wasn't that they were over fat. It was actually that they were under muscled. And it was the health of the skeletal muscle that was the missing message and question that we were asking. We've been asking the wrong question. We've been trying to fix the wrong problem. The problem isn't obesity and all the diseases that ride along with it. The problem is the health of skeletal muscle. Had we told her to increase her dietary protein, had we told her to do resistance training, we could have saved her life. We could have saved her metabolism, we could have saved her muscle, and we could have saved her brain.
So do we have any quick bit thoughts on what that was kind of telling us there that it's not an obesity problem, it's an under-muscled problem.
I have a quick, I already have an answer to this question, but I want to open up to everybody else. What do we think is like adequate muscle as we continue to age?
Well,
Like
in terms of
in
like
relation to percentage of body weight. Like I already know the general answer to this, but like, what do you guys think?
in terms of what the muscle percentage should be.
Muscle mass percentage of total body weight. Yeah.
So I actually don't know the answer to that, because when we were doing research for the menopause program that we did last October, I recently learned back then that like the DEXA scan doesn't actually measure muscle mass. Did you guys know that?
Yeah.
It
No.
actually
No.
only measures adipose tissue, and it's still an estimate of what the lean and muscle mass is. So right now, there's only the technology to actually measure muscle mass done in research. It's not like available to, I don't know if it's, I'm sure they can do it on humans, but it actually has to do with measuring creatine, because
Okay.
like 90% of creatine is stored in the muscle. So I don't know what the exact
Well, then
percentage
maybe
is.
maybe the numbers that I've found were just lean mass.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Well,
But anyway, so I've found, and this wasn't even something that I found while like researching stuff for this podcast. It's something that I learned a while ago, and it's like on average, like they say you're pretty solid if you're above 45% lean mass. Like 45% of your body weight is just lean mass. So
yeah, I do agree with that. And I think they were talking about lean mass, because I had heard that as well when we were doing this
So that would be
research.
55% body fat. Because lean mass is water, bone.
I don't think
and
I
muscle.
don't think lean mass included water. I think the lean mass was bones, muscles,
Yeah.
and the other organ
Yeah.
tissue, stuff like that. So, but yeah, I mean, that is a good question. We hear all these different numbers and percentages, and then there's usually some varying definitions and things like that. But when what I was starting to get down about the fat versus muscle thing is, I think that was in relation to the video. We were focused on the wrong problem. So we know good ranges for body fat percentages and what that should look like for men and women, and at what age groups and all that. But in terms of what is the optimal amount of muscle, the jury is still technically out on that.
Okay.
And so, or at least that's what I've seen as of like last October.
It's a
But
little
anyway,
harder
there-
to measure the muscle,
Yeah.
as we talked about. From like even research, the easiest way of measuring a specific muscle is through a biopsy, and most people are not getting
sure.
their actual muscle cut open and like
Right.
getting a biopsy of the muscle tissue. So it's more of a reverse calculation of body fat percentage, what your overall weight is, and then reverse engineering through being in mathematics into our lean mass and then therefore muscle mass. Generally speaking, I think more is usually better within reason. Obviously, if you're doing performance enhancing drugs or other things like that, it's going to limit the benefits of your muscle. But if you're just living healthy and like training hard, I think you'd be hard pressed to have too much muscle for that.
There's a lot of performance enhancing drugs around Peak City Gym.
Yeah. The adults over 40 run rampant.
Apex, North Carolina, that's just a big place. No, I along with this video, I want to ask you guys, I mean, you've trained other places. We've obviously trained here. Most of the time our clients are over 40. Do you think that this is still an issue? Are people, focused too much on fat loss, on weight loss, not as much on strength? Because I know in Keegan's opener there, we talked about social media is pushing that. It's obviously been brought to the forefront, but is it still, an issue? And is the eat less, move more movement kind of out, or are we still stuck in that mentality? What do you guys think?
It's at this point, with all like the GLP-1s and stuff, it's like eat less and don't worry about moving, like, and you can like, I've had clients in the past who are on GLP-1s and like they lose weight so fast, and a lot of it like, and you can see it on their body, a lot of it is muscle. So I think that's a big problem, that things are like even going in that direction now, where it's just like, get this weight off me. I don't care what it what it is.
Yeah. Oh, and I think that is a huge problem, and I don't think people can really lean on like they weren't educated about it, because there's tons of stuff saying like make sure that you're resistance training, make sure that you're consuming protein. And I will say that there are people in here, they've done strategy sessions and things, and you know they're sticking to that. They're hitting protein goals. They're doing well, but I mean, maybe for the general public, the average person who's on it, I mean, I'm not sure that they're doing themselves any favors when we're talking about longevity if you're not taking those precautions. And this isn't necessarily a debate on whether they should exist for everybody or nobody or all that. It's just that there is the warning of it will definitely induce muscle loss if you're not taking the steps to build muscle and maintain it.
And we talk about muscle so much and like the importance of having more muscle versus less body fat or vice versa, or why we should focus on more muscle because one, longevity, but it's also just so preserving of our health long term and our ability to enjoy life. If you're skinnier, you may not necessarily be able to do a lot of activities of daily life. But if you have more muscle, if you have more strength, you're more likely to be able to continue to open the jars for a long time, to be able to go up the stairs for a long time. Those things aren't directly correlated to having a lower body weight on the scale. But if we have more muscle, we're more likely to be able to do those things for longer. And that's why we push so heavily for muscle versus just overall weight loss, because like no one's really asking you what your weight is on the scale. Like I've never once been asked that in public by someone who wasn't interested in my training protocol. Like someone who wasn't talking to me about fitness specifically was not asking me what my body weight was. And they're more concerned of what I can do with it. So we want to, it's so much less than the scale. Same thing with like BMI. It's very outdated and not really up to date with what a true representation of health and longevity is. I'm personally overweight on BMI, and I don't think anyone in this gym, even people here, would say that I'm overweight.
Not to your face.
Not to my face. Maybe behind closed doors.
No.
But I don't think anyone would really call me overweight, but on a BMI scale, I am overweight. So I think shifting, and it really depends on the decade people were born. I think a lot more people in our age and younger are so focused on muscle, but the older people, the people that we work with, are more concerned about the weight loss because that's what they've been told about for the last 40, 50 years.
I mean, have you guys heard, and I know I've heard this quite a bit since, diving into, the demographic that we work with, a lot of people kind of ditching their houses because they're moving into ranch homes. And it's not necessarily because it's like, oh, we have, this medical issue. It's simply just that's really hard to get up and down stairs. And I know in, the next 5 or 10 years, I'm going to have some trouble. And just because, kind of feel it in my knees or kind of, my hips or anything like that. And it's like you're having to plan your whole life around the fact that now you can't get up a flight of stairs. So when we talk about the strength,
if you eliminate the stairs, then you will eliminate your ability to go up and down them.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a slippery slope.
Mm-hmm.
So, obviously hearing that a lot is, in the back of my mind, sometimes I'm like, oh no, right? You're going to lose that ability because now you're just not doing it ever, right?
Getting into the training aspects of things, we have resistance training and we have strength training. There is a difference, but they are similar. Can we talk a little bit about what that means for people when they're going into the gym or when they're just here in daily living?
Yeah. Resistance training is just you're using any type of resistance. So body weight exercises, bands, kettlebells, all that type of stuff. And that can be strength training, but that's only strength training up to a certain point because strength training involves progressive overload. And so progressive overload is essentially doing a little bit more than what you're capable of doing currently to then elicit that muscle damage and go through the recovery process where it'll rebuild and actually get a little bit bigger. So if you're looking to get stronger, you do strength training. All strength training is resistance training. Not all resistance training is strength training.
It's like a good SAT question right there, right?
Yeah.
Strength training is specifically training for the pursuit of strength,
Right.
which when we're training for life and daily life, it's more important to have more strength than necessarily more muscle, because with more strength, you will acquire more muscle. So it's kind of they're correlated, but they're not directly or exactly the same. You can train for more strength without necessarily getting really big and bulky.
Sure.
But if you train more in just the resistance bodybuilder style training, you'll get bigger and bulkier, but not necessarily stronger. And that's kind of a hard concept to understand, and part of why people hire trainers like us to kind of thread that line.
Like, if you look at me, I don't really look like I lift weights. For like 5 years, for like 5 years, I trained like powerlifting, and so I built a ton of strength without building a whole lot of muscle mass. So to your point, like if you're doing sets of like maximum 5, but usually like, sets of 3, you're really not going to put on a lot of muscle mass. Where if you're, and maybe I'm getting too much into the weeds now and we'll get there later, but sets of like 5 to 12, yeah, those are going to build more muscle mass than those lower rep sets.
Well, so I think it'll also be good to highlight for some of our listeners, like, how are you gaining strength without gaining muscle mass, or vice versa? Because in their mind, and we know this when people come into the gym, even though they know, like, all right, I know strength training is important, I know I'm supposed to be doing it, but I don't want to get bulky and I don't want to be too strong, so I'll just stick with these weights. And it's like, so wait a second, how am I going to get stronger if I'm not also putting on muscle mass? Do any of you guys want to take that?
I guess I can start since I kind of brought it up. There's kind of two answers. You're right. This is going to be a long podcast. There's two answers to that, because you have you have two different types of hypertrophy. You have sarcoplasmic, and then you have myofibrillar. Myofibrillar is basically the density of muscles. So you're building more muscle fibers that are like tightly packed together. Sarcoplasmic is what you see with like bodybuilders, where they kind of puff up. So if you're training primarily for strength, like those lower rep sets, then that's myofibrillar. I've never been able to say that word very well. Myofibrillar.
You're building more muscle.
You're building more muscle cells. And then there's also the nervous system adaptations that you're making. So that's like, recruitment of those muscle fibers to lift a certain amount of weight.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going as well, where, especially when you're starting out lifting, one, you're just reconnecting a lot of neural pathways. And so those initial bursts in strength, they're like, oh man, I'm feeling pretty good, I'm adding weight every week and things like that. Like, yeah, that's because your neural pathways are reconnecting. Then we're working on what's called motor unit recruitment, which we don't have to go into what that is, but the more motor units you recruit, the stronger you're going to be. If you're using lighter weights, you're not having to recruit as many motor units, and so you're effectively not getting stronger. You're just doing the resistance training.
Your muscle is only going to use as many parts of the muscle it needs to use in order to lift the weights. That's why it's important to train closer to failure. We kind of mentioned that when me and Brendan talked, is the closer you are training to failure, the more motor units or individual cells within the muscle that need to be utilized to lift the weight. That's why it gets harder and harder and harder, because you're fatiguing some while others are not being used. And then by the end of it, you're fatigued all of your individual cells. And that really kind of gets super complicated and isn't really what you need to know in order to get stronger. But it is an important concept to maybe kind of grasp a little bit, to know that it is both going to be a skill adjustment, a neurological adjustment of being able to just have confidence that you can push yourself that far. But then also there's going to be multitude of avenues that we can build strength through or build muscle through.
Instead of like resistance or strength training, we like to think of them coming here more for like resilience training. Brendan actually can touch a little bit on the programming side of things. I know CJ already brought up some reps and sets type deal, but when we're talking about building resilience, you need power, you need strength, you need stability. when you're writing the programs, especially for our small group training classes, and you're choosing reps and sets, what is going through your mind, and how does that help, our people either get stronger or,
Well, just kind of just some stats that I want to bring up that I ended up finding. We lose strength 3 times faster than we lose muscle mass, right? We lose power, so strength times speed, right? 2 to 3 times faster than we lose strength, right? So that's where it's like it's important to work on all of this. Now, I mean, sometimes you hear people where it's like, oh, I have my strength workouts, I have agility or power, whatever. Well, we do a blend, right? We only get to see people, 2 to 3 times a week, right? So we don't have the, luxury of working with people 5 times a week where we can start to separate things. So when writing the programs, we have to think about, strength. We have to think about muscle mass. We have to think about power. So, that's why, in those B blocks, and obviously our members will know what, and you guys know what I mean. That initial block after the warm-up, that's where, we're doing some of that power development. We're doing things like kettlebell swings. Now, power development can mean very different things to a lot of different people, right? So sometimes that power development is something like we're doing an agility ladder. Sometimes that power development may be, doing more of like, an Olympic lift type movement, right? So there's different meanings for that stuff. But then as we, get our heart rates up, we're working on that power, right? Then we start to move into our strength block. Now, strength block, right? Obviously, we train these things different ways, right? So as you kind of alluded to earlier, right? Higher loads, lower reps, right? You're going to make more strength gains in that like range, right? Now, with that, obviously, reps and sets is always important, right? But rest periods, which is something that, we especially I know I annoy a lot of our members with the constant reminders of like, please take a break. Like, no, you're not allowed to do anything until your heart rate hits this, just to try to get them to take a rest. If you're not resting, you're not able to put as much effort into those reps, right? So now, let's say, you lifted, 8 reps of a 200-pound deadlift, right? And really you could have gotten 10. Well, that's 8 reps by the time you get through 4 sets. Well, if you do 8 times 200, that's 1,600 pounds that you just no longer lifted because you didn't want to take a break, right? So you just missed out on essentially a whole set by only skipping 2 reps per set because you didn't want to take that little break. Now, when we look at some of the studies, like they, a lot of times they're comparing like, okay, under 60 seconds to 2 minutes or, in some cases 3 to 5 minutes. Now, 3 to 5 minutes, when you're talking about lifting heavy deadlifts and, some of those bigger compound movements, like, yes, you need to take longer rests because you will have more quality reps, which will in turn lead to a lot of times more volume, right? Or at least that's the idea, right? So, and then when you move into like our, so that's our C block, right? The strength, okay, lift heavy, lower reps, longer rest. Then you move into our D block. That's where you're going to see a little more of the supplemental stuff, right? So things that aren't necessarily compound movements. So those where it's like, okay, now that we're doing stuff where it's more supplemental, it's like, okay, maybe we can take a little less, less rest because, we're not lifting as heavy of loads. We're doing more of a higher rep count in a lot of these exercises. So that's where you'll see more of the stuff of like, 8, 12, 15, things like that. Where in C block, you're going to see more of like, 3, 5, in that rep range. So for hypertrophy reasons, like obviously you want, more volume, right? Where, for strength, you kind of pull it back a little.
So we've talked about hypertrophy, power, strength, agility. Why do those matter, especially for adults over 40 who are not trying to be bodybuilders or step on stage or do anything or get like super muscular, super strong? Why does it matter to kind of hit all of those different aspects of fitness and training?
Yeah, well, when you're over 40, as Brendan said, we lose, strength first. That's definitely a use it or lose it. So once you have muscle mass, that muscle mass doesn't necessarily have to be quality muscle because fat can infiltrate the muscle. You can have a steak that looks, or a muscle that looks like a steak just full of fat in there instead of that filet mignon. That's like a famous picture and things like that. So when we're working on things like power development, we're enhancing the type 2 fibers that are going to be the first to go. And not only that, but the fatty acids that are stored in the muscle, those are getting used up and used for energy rather than sitting and staying in the muscle. The other thing too, just like, I don't know if you guys know this, I remember it from my grad school days, but do you know how many steps somebody takes before they either slow down, speed up, or change direction?
No.
Close. It's actually 3 to 4 steps. So there's a study done, and you think about just daily life, like, oh, I got to slow down. I'm going to speed up here, just like avoid this, whatever it is. They had pedometers on people, and that's what they found. Pedometers and accelerators, I think. But anyway, that whole thing, that whole sequence of slowing down, speeding up, changing direction, all takes power. That's what Brennan was
Oh, okay.
talking about with
I
the
was wondering, I'm
agility
like,
ladders and stuff.
what is the meaning behind that number?
Well,
Okay.
it's so all of that takes power,
Yeah.
and those are the things that we lose. So as we age, if you are not able to accelerate, decelerate, change direction, what is the likelihood that you're going to be falling? So power development goes into strength. You can't have something that's strong in a functional capacity without some type of power. If you want to simplify the definition, power is moving something quickly, where strength, you can just muscle it out and it doesn't really matter how much time, but you need that component to it.
So power is important for the uncertainties in life to help prevent those picking up a hamper and twisting your back or stepping off a curb unexpectedly and not rolling your ankle or falling. So that's why power is important.
Well, and if you think about how many people or how many times, people fall, like it's that fall, right? They're not able to catch themselves. They fall, and then that's where you break a hip, break a wrist, and all of a sudden now it's like you're out of the gym. Now you're not able to do your workouts. Now you're losing time, muscle mass, and it can be a slippery slope. So yeah, power's pretty
With how
important.
quickly we're losing power, strength, muscle as we age, that becomes really important to have as minimal time off as possible in the gym, because it does go so much faster than when you're younger. Any amount of time that you're spending out of the gym, you're losing so much more, and that's why it feels so difficult to keep up with your health and your fitness as you age. It's not because you're losing it while you work out. You're just losing it while you're not working out. So consistency with all of that becomes much more important with age. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be consistent 5 days a week with 100% effort, just being consistent with anything.
Yeah, and just to clarify, obviously, when you say take time off, it's like, oh, well, I'm going here on, vacation for 2 weeks, and then I'm going to be, I have a really busy work week, then the following week when I get back, and now it's like, okay, well, now you haven't been for 3 weeks. It's not like, oh, I worked out yesterday, I'm working out tomorrow, but I'm losing all of my gains like today on my rest day. It's like, that's not what you're talking about. So just to clarify for all the people listening, that's not what
So
we
how
mean.
often should we be working out per week, or let's think a little bit bigger picture, per month?
So, all right. So in terms of a month, I mean, you can just kind of like add this up. But in terms of like a week, right? So there's different studies that found for hypertrophy, right? Like the volume matters, but the frequency doesn't matter as much. It's the volume that matters. Yeah. Strength is different, right? Now with strength, they actually found that more frequency is better, right? So, if you're doing like 8 sets of squats, instead of doing them all on one day, or like let's say Monday, right? We do 8 sets of squats on Monday, and it's like got all my strength stuff in for that, the week. It's like, well, it's actually better if you split it up, right? So 1 day of 4 sets. A couple days, another day of 4 sets, and again, it comes back to like, quality of reps, quality of sets, being able to push yourself. I mean, you do 8 sets of squats, you're gonna be really tired.
There's something to say about that. If you think about, first of all, like those first 1 to 3 sets are going to be like the highest quality sets that you have, and then exponentially, it's going to drop off after maybe like 5 sets. So you got to think, if you take 8 sets of squats a week and you split them up to 6 days a week and you do 2 every day, every single one of those squats are going to be extremely stimulating and like really high quality. Whereas again, if you jammed it all in one day, like 3 or 4 of those sets aren't going to be that stimulating because you're already highly fatigued. You're not going to be able to get as high quality of reps. And if you try to get a high quality set on that eighth set, that means you're probably taking some stimulating reps away from those first couple sets. So yeah, there's something really valuable about splitting up those sets across.
Well, and just to clarify, these are working sets.
Yes,
Right?
yeah,
Not
right.
like, hey, I'm gonna go do back squat and my first set is the bar, right? And I mean, unless that's all like what you can do, right? But it's like if you're back squatting 300 pounds, like the bar is not counting as your first set,
Right.
right? So just to clarify, these are working sets. Like,
How would you structure that within a program if you have when you're looking at even our programs, you have 4 sets of something, and we have everyone just do the 4 sets. But if you're training on your own or training at home, how would you structure that or utilize the programs that we have written with getting those warm-up sets in? Or is it just a warm-up and you're good to go? Do you personally do anything different or recommend something different?
depends on how heavy I'm lifting that day. If I'm gonna go like super heavy, like a lot of times I'll do like a like drop chain where it's like, all right, I'll start with a higher rep count. So I'm still like pushing myself. But we'll do like, like 8, 6, 4. And then if I'm doing like heavy 2s, I'll just stick with and then go 2s. Now, one thing we did with, now this takes a long time. I don't necessarily recommend it, but I thought it was pretty creative. We did an Eric Cressy program back in the day. And so you worked up your way up to that top set. Right. So, you're doing however many sets of 5, and it's like, all right, we'll go till you hit your top set. And then whatever's within, what was it, like 80% of that weight? Okay, you can count those. But so if you did like 4 sets and that was not within 80% of your, it's like, no, those don't count. So it's like, oh, well, dang, this workout just got a lot longer. And then it's like, all right, I need to maybe learn my weights a little bit better, like take a little bit bigger jumps, maybe do some less warm-up sets. But there's a bunch of different ways that you can do that. I mean, it just depends. If you're doing it more like our workouts, ideally, like everything we do in B block, right? If we're doing like deadlifts or RDLs, a lot of times we're doing swings to try to like, okay, we're going to move it fast. We're going to work on power development, but it's also working that hip hinge. So that way, by the time you get into C block, it's like, all right,
Ready to go.
You're kind of warmed up. Now that first set, it may still feel like a little bit of a warm up set. And we'll have some people that'll be like, all right, I won't count this one, and then I'll just count my next one as my first one, and that's fine. But a lot of times, unless you're already just like lifting a massive amount, a lot of times people can just kind of hop into their first set.
So you're saying that you set the workouts up logically, and you don't just draw the exercises out of the hat?
I don't roll the dice.
B block sets up C block.
Yes, it's a continuation as we go. So all of B block, that's
Did
why
you
we
guys
talk
know that? I
about.
didn't.
That's why we talk
just
about like,
explained it every time.
B block being like, yes, we're working on power development and stuff, but it's still movement prep for all the strength stuff we're doing in the next block. So yes, there is thought that goes into every block and the reps as well.
With this, does it train us for being better adults? The things that we do here, we mentioned this in our last podcast of how all of our activities are kind of balanced to create a better quality of life and build muscle, but not necessarily the most amount of muscle. How else do these things correlate to typical longevity metrics that people may have?
Yeah. So with longevity specifically, did you guys watch the Peter Attia thing on 60 Minutes? Not that any of us watched
I
60
saw some of the
Minutes.
clips, yeah.
Some of the clips. Yeah. So actually that was like a perfect advertisement for us. Thank you, Peter. Because
We know him personally.
he said, he was talking about like, you want to train like an athlete. What is our, classes called? They're called Ageless Athlete. Why does he say that? Because you need to work on everything all at once. That's called undulating periodization, where linear periodization would be if we were able to work on just, core stability and joint stability. Then we're going to work on hypertrophy. Then where we mix things up with the way that Brendan just described the programming. But what he talks about, and he is another doctor that's big on longevity, is that there's a strength component and a fitness component that is actually more indicative of longevity than even blood work like cholesterol and stuff like that. So he tests things, and it goes right along with the research. Again, I remember from grad school, there's actually 4 best indicators of mortality overall, and that's VO2 max. That's the king one, which still does require strength, and we can talk about that in a second if you want to. There's also grip strength, the ability to get off the ground, which again requires strength, and then walking speed, which also requires strength and power, as we just talked about. So all of the stuff in the programs, we're talking about squats, we're talking about deadlifts and all that type of stuff. We're not exactly talking about the other things that we're building strength in, like our Turkish roll-ups, like our, single leg squat to a box and other things like that, that's going to carry over more functionally. I think everybody knows that farmers carries and crossover carries are going to be at least 2 days a week. If they didn't understand before they got here, they have definitely heard me say how often, especially Marnie Cohen, about how grip strength is associated with mortality. Talking about like tendons and ligaments and all that stuff.
Yeah, obviously with bone density, that is a major one. We actually have a member here, who when she first started training, ironically just happened to have a bone density test, and had been training for a while, and came in all excited one day, and she's like, my bone density actually went up,
Yeah.
right? So, I know now, like, some people probably would just sit there and be like, nice. But it's a huge deal,
huge.
especially when you're fighting that uphill battle, right? I've heard numerous times, a lot of these people when they fall, right? We talked about power and falls. There are a lot of times when people fall and break their hip, that it's not the fall that necessarily breaks their hip, it's their hip breaks and then they fall, right? So, whatever it's, maybe it's a stress fracture, maybe it's just low bone density, right? Like, so again, talk about longevity, right? I mean, I can't remember exactly what the stat is, but at a certain point, if you break a hip or you have one of those type of injuries, like, I mean, I think it's within 2 years.
Yeah, it's within a year.
Oh,
I
it's
was just
within
trying
a
to look
year.
that up.
I was about to say I couldn't remember, but on average, within a year, people die, right? And so that's like, I mean, that's
It's a crazy high
terrifying.
percentage too.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
terrifying.
It really comes back to that idea of the consistency. When you get injured, you're unable to work out, which means you're losing the strength, you're losing the power, the muscle at a much faster rate, like 3 times faster. And then once you finally are able to get back into things, you're starting from so much lower of a point, but you're still losing. And it becomes even more of an uphill battle to regain that previous strength that you had. And that's why it's important to be able to just stay healthy. And really, just one of the number one goals of training and doing all of these things is just staying healthy.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, there's a good chance, depending on how old you are and what the injury is, that you won't return back to your previous levels of strength. And part of that, like you were talking about, is the consistency, because, yeah, we're talking about muscle, we're talking about muscle quality, but also tendons and ligaments. All right. They're the ones that are stabilizing the joints, they're the ones that are connecting the muscle to the bones. And actually, with bones, tendons, and ligaments, they all have mechanotransduction properties. So that's just meaning that there's cells within those that respond to stress stimuli. So, resistance training or strength training. And then that translates into biochemical reactions, hormone secretions, and all of that to develop new cells. So, and new fibers. So like with tendons, all of those fibers go nice and even. And that way, when you're going to contract or pull on the muscle, they pull on the bone and the bones move. Well, if you don't have a certain amount of stress to repair those tendons, and it's actually, I think it's above 70% of your max effort, then there's a chance that the repair of those tendons and ligaments are not going to be those nice parallel fibers and all that. You're not pushing yourselves to the point where it's going to send out those signals to repair it correctly. And bones are the same way. There's things in these cells called osteocytes, or in bone called osteocytes, and those respond to the stresses put on them. And actually, for women, it's even more important because estrogen controls the production of what are called osteoclasts. And osteoclasts are the cells that go in and remove bone and damaged tissue, which is why osteoporosis and osteopenia is so prevalent in women. And so by going ahead and making sure that your resistance training and your strength training properly, you're going to get a release of what are called osteoblasts, and those are the new cells to form new bone tissue. So basically, resistance training sends the signal to bones, tendons, and ligaments to send out the basically the reactions that are necessary to repair, get the fibers going in the way that they need to go, and all that.
Specifically, the forces and the pressure are what's eliciting those responses from our body. That's why strength training and lifting heavy relatively to yourself is so important, because those activities are going to send those signals. Same thing with jumping or running, which I don't necessarily recommend running for most people just because we do it wrong as like a society. It's just not good for most people because we can't do it appropriately or properly. But like jumping and strength training as a whole, those compressive forces from the weights and from the collisions are what elicits responses from our body to start to build the muscle or build the bones and the tendons and things, and like actually feed those things. Otherwise, your body's like, I don't really need this. Let's get rid of it, because it's trying to stay safe and not spend more energy than it needs to.
Yeah. And it's funny that you said that, like, as a society, we don't know how to run, because I was literally just telling CJ last night, like, no one ever taught us how to run. It was just like, see that tree over there? Get there faster than walking. And it was like, all right. And it's like, I think I just move my arms like this. And it's like, no one ever said, like, okay, drive your knee, like push the ground away. And it's like,
a little off topic now, but it's supposed you're talking to a retired runner. It's supposed to come naturally to us. But with our shoes and sitting all the time and everything surrounding our normal, modern lives, we lose that ability to run efficiently. So, yeah.
People just have so much dysfunction within their body, pretty much from the get-go, that we lose the ability to run appropriately. And like, I was a Division I track and field athlete, like kind of competing at top amateur level in track and field, and I not once ever in my life got taught how to run. Like, we had strides, and that was supposed to teach you better form,
right?
But no one was like broke it down and was like, you need to do this and this and this and this, unless you're a sprinter.
Now
then they
you see
get
on
really
Instagram,
nitty-gritty.
right? Oh, like this drill, like this is what you do, and it's like now all of a sudden everyone's like trying to get the technique down and all this stuff, and it's like, wow, this is.
I would say, like, with respect to how running can be valuable is sprinting. And of course, I mean, yes. you can't take a 70-year-old who's never sprinted and just be like, hey, let's run some 40s. So like, there's a way to progress up to that.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, sprinting really could replace like a lot of leg work if you sprint like once or twice a week.
I mean, if you look at the Olympics, right, and you see like these Olympic sprinters, and then you see like the cross country, like, oh, we're gonna run like the mile, and it's like there's definitely a difference in muscle mass.
Let's lay off the cross country runners.
I mean, am I wrong?
You're not wrong. You're absolutely not wrong.
You look at the thighs, and you're like, sprinters' thighs are like the size of my head, and it's like, obviously, like they need to put more force into the ground. They're going a shorter distance, right? Where when you're running 2 miles, 5 miles, it's like, all right, like,
well, and it kind of goes back to what Keegan was saying, like now we're just trashing long distance running, but long distance running, like, it's all, your body just wants to be as efficient as possible for a long period of time. So yes, it's going to get rid of any muscle mass it doesn't need. Your bones get really dense, but at the same time, like, there's overuse issues there.
I think, I mean, I'm okay with you bashing long distance running because I bash it all the time, but I think it's important because it actually ties together a few things that we talked about before, all the way back to Gabrielle Lyon's video, where, there are people, even though they know I should be doing strength training and all that, they are still concerned about the number on the scale. They do think that, weightlifting is going to put on this, crazy amount of muscle mass, and they're going to be, too bulky, looking like the Hulk or something. And so then what do when they're outside of here? They try to do a bunch of cardio and running. And we actually had one person that is very similar to the person that Gabrielle Lyon is talking about. Now, I didn't image her brain or anything like that. So I don't know. And I hope that that's not like the fate that she's going to be going down. But, we do these strategy sessions and you see the form coming in, and she knows that resistance training and strength training is important, like hypothetically, theoretically, but she was constantly doing exactly what they said, her strategy session form, stop the weight gain without having to eat like a bird, slim down, not bulk up, address hunger issues with food I'm allowed to eat. And I wish I wasn't as injury prone and could be more flexible. Well, the injuries, as we just talked about, she was somebody who came in and pretty much only did, 5-pound weights, body weight exercise, which again, if that's all you can do, that's awesome. That's no problem. But if you're not putting in the work in the gym and then going out and doing that long distance running, well, those forces that you're creating with every single step and stride could be like, 13 times your body weight or 11 times your body weight, something like that. I'd have to look up the studies, but
three times.
It's
3 times your body weight each and
times.
every stride when you're running comes back up through your bones and tendons, and dependent upon how heavy you are, 3 times every single step is a lot.
Yeah, that matters too. Yeah.
So you're continually doing that micro damage. And then, again, not to call this person out, but on here we have like, how committed are you to your goals? Weekday warrior. I'm willing to work toward my goals during the week, but weekends are for indulging. Now we know because they were open, but there's, a lot of tailgating, a lot of things like that, which again, completely fine. However, if you're always injured, you're always choosing to do this long distance running, which then injures you and you can't do the stuff for the strength training. Like, how are you building strength? How are you building muscle mass? And it's, again, that what you should be doing, but that mindset is still stuck in like some of the misinformation that we got through the 80s and early 90s.
Not only that, all the inflammation that's being caused by those injuries is like degrading all of like the tissues, right? So now like the inflammation is causing more injuries. Now you're out of the gym longer. Now it's creating more inflammation because you're continuously hurt. And it's like this cycle of, well, how do you break it now, right? So like eventually you're just going to have to figure out how to break that cycle and kind of get back into it.
Yeah, and she's not the only one, and she's not that old, and neither are some of the other people that we see. And it's like, I know we joke around, we have a good time, we obviously push strength and everything, but I hope that it does resonate with our members and our listeners that like it is actually important. It's not just, quote unquote bro science that like, well, they just like to do curls and stuff when we don't really do that many. But it is actually important, and it does have, long-term benefits and consequences if you don't end up doing it.
One of the biggest benefits of strength training, and a lot of research has backed this up, is and kind of supported the idea that strength training is one of the best depressive medications that you can do without actually needing a prescription for it. Has anyone had experience with this personally, or worked with someone who's found some benefits in strength training with more of the mental side of life?
No, go ahead.
Naps after you.
Well, I was just gonna say, me and Brendan were just talking the other day, and because I've been researching like the mental health side of all of it, and I was like, I've trained almost every day for like years, and I've still battled like at times like pretty bad anxiety. And he was like, well, think about like if you didn't strength train, like imagine how bad it could be. But no, to your point, like, yeah, studies have shown strength training alleviates anxiety symptoms to the same extent that medication or therapy does in even like moderate anxiety cases, which is like a pretty big, like moderate anxiety is still like pretty bad, which I think is astounding. Now, what were you going before I say anything? What were you going to say?
Oh no,
Brandon?
I was just going to talk about my own experience with like some of that stuff in terms of like some of the anxiety. Like it definitely helps with honestly, anytime I'm feeling anxious, just getting some of that energy out. Obviously, when you start lifting, you're not really thinking about the stuff that's making you anxious a lot of times. So like also, it's a healthy habit to, like take your mind off things. And then I'm kind of to the point now where if I don't get enough energy out in some way, and a lot of times it is strength training, I'm just, you can tell it's like restless especially at night, like restless legs, like definitely a little more irritable. I'm sure you can speak on that. No, but definitely
Or irritating.
Yeah.
It's like only at night.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, just like a little bit like irritable, like definitely, and that's why I like working out before classes start, right? So people look at me like I'm kind of an idiot for like, why would you ever get up that early? And I'm like, I can tell you'll notice a difference in my mood if I don't work out that morning, and I do work out that morning. So, I mean, in terms of a lot of that stuff, I mean, my own personal experience, I'm like, it definitely helps. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit different for everybody in terms of the extent, but I don't think that anyone's being like, my exercise is making my anxiety worse, unless you're like taking a bunch of pre-workout, and then I think it's the caffeine that might be making it worse.
Yeah, could have, yeah, 4
Yeah.
cups of coffee.
Yeah.
It doesn't do me any good.
I've personally found so much benefit in strength training. I don't always strength train, but in terms of like, I've dedicated working out in the last 2 months, 3 days, and that's been this week. but outside of that,
In preparation for this podcast.
in preparation for
I had to see what it was going to be like.
I had to remind myself what strength training was like. But outside of that, I just do so many other things to expel energy. I take my dog for walks. We go hiking. Like I'm doing so many other things outside. And for me, that's more beneficial for depression and anxiety symptoms of just like getting outside of myself and thinking and focusing on something else. So beyond just the strength training benefits of the hormones and the release of like exciting hormones, we see a benefit in just being able to separate ourselves from our body for a little bit, or bring ourselves into our body for a little bit and separate ourselves from our mind.
Yeah. So, I mean, we can talk a little bit about like the actual neurochemistry of what happens. It's nothing crazy. I mean, so like immediately after you work out, immediately after you strength train specifically, there's actually a drop in cortisol, which
Is your stress
again,
hormone?
is your stress hormone. And if you're doing a lot of running, cortisol is actually increased. So we can take another jab at long distance. I am going to redeem long distance running in a little bit.
It's bad.
There's also you get a like your body is just flushed with endorphins and endocannabinoids. That happens immediately. Over time, it helps build like self-efficacy and like mental resilience and things like that. So it's more of like a psychological benefit over time. And they have found that like in the long term, if you're regularly strength training, your baseline level of anxiety is significantly lower than if you weren't strength training. That being said, over time, they found that regular cardio, even though immediately after running, your cortisol levels are spiked, over time, cardio has a more distinct effect on your neurochemistry than strength training does. So ultimately the answer to like what's good for your mental health is a little bit of both. But again, if we're running 5 or 6 days a week and we're not strength training, that's obviously not ideal. So
We've talked about that amongst us, and it's known amongst us anyway. But strength training, resistance training, training for longevity, it's all an art, right? It's not like an exact science. You look at some of these studies and they're like, well, actually, they're talking about like on leg extension you know, in the quadriceps in a clinical setting. They're not talking about like what that means out in real life, or they'll do it on overground walking for 400 meters. And it's like, okay, well, that was a straight line for 400 meters. We just learned that you only take 3 to 4 steps before you have to change direction and stuff like that. So, you know, there's stuff that I think that you can take outside of some of that research.
I think a lot of people take those things and then extrapolate too far.
Yeah.
But I mean, we have 35 plus years of experience among all of us. We see a lot of anecdotal evidence of the benefits of strength training and versus cardio. The people that are cardio centric usually have significantly higher rates of injury. And a lot of that comes from just being under muscled and doing too much of one thing. And strength training just allows you to be a lot more diverse with your movement patterns, which is why we have less injury chances with people who are doing strength training or resistance training.
And there's so many variables that go into this stuff that it's like, it's hard to narrow down like, oh, this is the ideal thing to do, right? So like, and to be honest, we're still, especially with all the strength research, it's like, even though it's like, I mean, we've been studying this for a little bit, it's like, well, in the grand scheme of things, not really, right? Like everything was focused so much on weight loss for so long that it was like, who cares about muscle? It's like, I mean, probably only the last, what, like, would you say probably 15, 20, 25 years have we really been like, and even then you could probably argue like only more recently has it been like, all right, let's just dive into strength and let's like see what the deal is
Even
here.
the entirety of exercise science is like probably like the newest branch of science. It's a very new field of study. So things change quite a bit. Yeah.
And there's not a lot of money in it specifically. Like prescriptions and medications get a lot more money and support to do these research things, versus strength training, you can't get a copyright on it. Like you're just helping people get fitter and healthier while you're not directly benefiting from any of those things.
You know, if you're doing, if like I'm doing exercise right, it gets me to the point where I don't need to spend money to rely on drugs or, you know, even I'm a personal trainer, but like ideally, like you don't want to have to rely on a personal trainer. You know, you want to be able to, it's all about self-efficacy.
A lot of my clients, the main reason my reason why they hire me is not because they don't know how to do it or they're not able to do it on their own. A little bit is they just don't have the ability to motivate themselves to go to it. But if they have a schedule session with somebody, they're going to be more likely to show up.
Right.
But also, they just don't want to think about it. Like they have the knowledge and the information, but they don't want to put that mental load towards them. A lot of my previous private clients were really high up in business, and they didn't care. They were probably able to figure it out. They're very smart individuals, but they didn't want to put any of the mental capacity that they had throughout the day on figuring it out. And that's usually where I find the more consistent clients is the people who is just like hands off, like take the wheel. Jesus, take the wheel.
My time is valuable somewhere else, so I'm going to pay you to do this, right?
Like I could do my own accounting probably, but like, do I want to? No.
Probably not a good idea.
It's probably not a good idea. Exactly.
A coach is able to, we mentioned that strength training and getting fitter is an art. A coach is able to like look at the big picture and really paint the whole portion of the canvas, like getting your mobility, your stability, your agility, your power, your strength. A coach can see all of those different aspects and build a program more appropriately suited for you, versus that's just so much mental load that you don't want to really take on, because you have to learn so many different things. You have to know how to apply it to yourself, versus a coach who has 10, 5, whatever, however many years of experience, has worked with so many different people. They're already going to have like the canvas set up, the paints that they need, and they're going to be ready to apply that to you specifically.
I think what you just said about the big picture is super important, and it ties back to with all the stuff that's on social media and, you know, information coming from every direction. But people can get lost in the details, you know, and I I'll write programs for the small groups, write them for private clients. But then when I write it for myself, I'm like, I have the curse of knowledge where I'm like, well, I'm going to try to write the most perfect program ever. I should never need another one after this. And like, I know that that's not the case, but I still will get to that point. Like, well, I want to include this. I want to include that.
I need to be working on this.
Yeah, exactly. So even as a coach, sometimes it's nice where I'm like, good, Brendan released a new program. I'm just going to follow that. Or if I'm working out with him, I'm like, I'm going to do what you do. And I've done that for a long time because I just don't want to.
There was a time that we got kind of called out in one of our masterminds where it's like, you guys believe in coaching so much. How many of you guys have coaches? And it was like 3 people in a room full of trainers were like, I have somebody write my programs. And it's like everyone else is like looking around like, yeah, and it's like, yeah, I mean, like, we have a curse of knowledge.
The fastest progress I ever made, besides when I like first started lifting weights, fastest progress I ever made was like the 6 months that I hired a coach.
Yeah.
I've never once coached myself. Whenever I've been like dedicated to training.
Probably why you don't have any good pictures up there.
Whenever I've like dedicated to training, I've always hired a coach. I've never once coached myself because I'll buy a program, I'll buy something that is predestined to like, maybe it's not the best program for everyone, but it's something that I can follow that I don't have to think on, because otherwise I will try to overcomplicate it and be like, I don't really want to back squat today. I'm going to do this fancy exercise and maybe do some toe mobility stuff. Like I get too far in the weeds. But if I hire someone else or I buy a program, it makes it so much easier. When I know that a lot of y'all have kind of not really hired coaches, but what would you recommend for someone just starting out of they've never worked out before, or maybe it's been a long time, they're trying to get back into the swing of things and like want to focus on building strength and know that that's the thing that they need to do? Where should they go?
Well,
Peak City
Gym.
Gym.
Yeah, here, right?
Peak City Gym.
Well, I will say in our Instagram link tree, we do have a free basic program, and it covers basically all the things that Brendan was talking about. With B block, C block, all that type of stuff. It's very basic movement patterns. You don't need much equipment, and all the videos are us doing the exercises. So
we'll also link that in the description and the show notes for this, so you can just check down there before you go to our Instagram.
Yeah. And so I think if you're looking for like, I need something free, I mean, you can get free programs anywhere. I mean, YouTube is full of them, all sorts of different stuff, but I don't know all of those ones. I can speak on the content that we make and the stuff that we put out. And so if you're going to start out and you're just going to go to a big box gym and you feel overwhelmed, you don't need much equipment. You just need a little bit of space. Bring a couple dumbbells over to you, or do it at home and just hold on to things that have mass and weigh something. And if that would be a good place to start.
Sometimes body weight is plenty for so many people. One of the cheapest and just kind of like cost-effective ways of getting into strength training is just a suspension trainer. It doesn't have to be a TRX or Olympic rings, but anything where you're anchoring it above you on a tree, on a door, whatever, anchoring it somewhere, and then you can do so many different things with just your body weight as resistance, but changing your angle with this.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about, because we've like talked about rep ranges and we mentioned calisthenics a little bit. But yeah, especially like people who maybe come to the gym, but they're going on vacation for like a month or two or something. There's generally a misconception around body weight training that it like won't build strength or build muscle or anything. But when it comes down to, so the range of building muscle and building strength really is anywhere between 5 and 30 reps. Like 30 reps it's not going to build maximal strength like a heavy deadlift, but you will get stronger with a set of 30 reps so long as it approaches failure. I think we talked about that even in the last podcast.
You need to reach that failure point to really eliminate any kind of change.
And so yeah, if you're on vacation or you're just starting out and you don't have any equipment and you don't have a gym to go to or anything, push-ups, suspension trainer with some like doing rows on a suspension trainer, body weight squats. You can do unilateral squats that makes them harder. Like there's a lot of things you can do that can take you way farther than you thought without any equipment. Now that does take like a good amount of knowledge and nuance as far as like progressing and, creating your own program, which is where a coach comes in, and coming to classes, that makes it a lot easier because you don't have to think about it.
We do have an at-home
Yeah,
and
we
a,
have-
and a travel
in the
program as
app.
well on
Yeah,
our app.
exactly.
Yeah, our members have access to that for sure.
Uh-huh.
And I think as a maintenance, like if you're a normal gym goer and you're gonna be gone for a little bit and all that, then yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that body weight training is just like with the whole eat less, move more type movement where, yeah, it absolutely will work and is great advice up until a certain point. And then like most of it is going to be maintenance. So you're not going to increase, 1 rep max or your VO2 max or anything by doing body weight training. VO2
I don't know, you
max,
ever-
I guess
I was about to say
running.
VO2 max.
VO2 max maybe. You
But-
ever see like the street workout guys in like New York?
Yeah.
Like those
Geez,
guys
yeah.
get huge. Their legs might not be so great, but yeah, they're
Their pull-ups
huge.
are.
That is the
Yeah.
one limiter with body weight or at-home training is just you can't push that much weight with your legs.
Right.
And that's really where it starts to fall apart. But you've got to be pretty advanced and pretty strong
Yeah.
to where that
To
becomes
exhaust.
an issue.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Well, and
There's so
and
many
I-
different techniques that you can manipulate to achieve like
Mhm.
fatigue and strength.
Well,
with
especially
our
if you're an
muscles.
untrained person or you're just getting into it, like you said, the body weight stuff is going to be fine. But like you said, up until a certain point, you're going to hit a certain level where it's like, I have to do some sort of progressive overload
Yeah.
where I either got to buy a vest or just buy some
Well,
kettlebells
yeah,
and
weight vests
dumbbells,
is- yeah.
right? So weighted vests can go a long way too.
Now I've heard we already talked about Peter Attia. I listened to a podcast once with Peter Attia and Stuart McGill, and they talked about this idea of like strong enough.
Yeah.
Okay, so like not everybody needs to be training for like a 405 deadlift or something. So what is strong enough? And I think like as far as like legs go for calisthenics, if you can do a set of like 20 or 30 pistol squats, like you got some pretty solid legs on you. They might not be huge. They might not be like the strongest, but like that's pretty solid.
When they're
I've
one
been able
rec-
to squat
Don't ask me to do those right now.
385 and doing a set of 20 pistol squats would put me on my butt.
Oh yeah, I mean that's
Like,
it's a lot
they're
of
very
pistol
different
squats.
style
Yeah.
strengths, but
Yeah,
like
sure.
a pistol squat will put most people out. So if you can get
Yeah.
20 repetitions in a row on a pistol squat,
Mhm.
I think that's going to be plenty strong enough.
When they
Yeah.
talk about like deadlifting, like being able to deadlift your body weight, right? Like
Mhm.
10 times, right? Or something like that. There's certain things that where, yeah, it doesn't have to be like I have to make sure my 1 rep max goes up, but it's like you got to have some sort of marker, like being able to carry your body weight up like a flight of stairs,
Yeah.
right? Things like that.
One of the good ways that I think Peter Attia has broken it down is looking at what you want to be able to do as you age in life and kind of reverse engineering how you need to train to achieve those things.
His decathlon,
Yeah,
like that
his
he was
Centurion
talking about.
decathlon,
Yeah, yeah.
which is a 100-year decathlon. So by the age of 100, what activities do you want to be doing up until that point? And most people aren't living to 100, but it's still the same premise, whether it's 75. Centurion just sounds cooler than 75 decathlon. So whatever you want to be able to do later on in life, look at those things and reverse engineer how you need to be able to achieve it. So if hiking is your passion, you're going to need a good VO2 max, but you're also going to need a really good zone 2 capacity or aerobic capacity. So you'll need to focus a little bit more on doing those things and training that style of training in order to be able to continue to do that.
Right. Balance would be a
Like,
big factor. in
We don't
that
want to
too.
get stronger or fitter for no reason, unless maybe like fitness and training is your thing, but then maybe this podcast isn't for you. But we don't want to do it just for no reason because we love it. We want to do it for a reason to facilitate our life in a better way. So what kind of things do you want to do? How do you want to be able to do them? And look at how, or talk to a trainer or talk to a coach on how you can actually achieve those things and what kinds of things do you need to get better at to achieve those things.
Yeah, I think that perfectly answers the question that you asked, CJ, is like, all right, well, what is strong enough? And it's Well, I just want to be strong enough to do the things that I love doing.
Right.
In terms of, we talked about the distinction between muscle mass and strength, even though most people don't want to, bulk up in their later years and things like that. One, you probably won't because you're pushing a rock up a hill trying to gain muscle. So we're really trying to maintain it mostly, although it is possible to gain muscle in your older years. But in terms of muscle mass, you want that just in case you do come down with some type of illness or diagnosis or something that is going to deplete you of your muscle tissue. And we talked about that in a different podcast on how it breaks down into amino acids and goes to the places where you need new tissue developed. So, I think, being able to be resilient in what I want to do outside of the gym, and then also making sure that I have kind of my insurance policy against any health issues down the line as much as possible. That's kind of where I'm looking for, or what I'm looking for out of my strength training and resistance training.
What advice would you give to someone who may not be new or may not just be getting back into it, but they've plateaued? They've been training for a while. They just feel like they're not able to progress in their strength numbers or in how they feel. How would you advise someone like that?
Well, in terms of the workouts, obviously that's where like cycling comes in, right? So
What do you mean by that?
So, I mean, we write programs, right? So that's where it's like you can have different like phases where you are different cycles where it's like, hey, for 12 weeks, maybe a little more linear periodization where it's like, oh, we'll do like a hypertrophy cycle. We can do like a strength cycle. You can start to mix it up. You don't have to make it the same thing every time. So especially strength gains, right? Manipulating loads, time under tension. So again, like just instead of sticking with the same thing and on the exact opposite side, doing something new every single day, right? Finding some sort of combination where it's not like you're doing the same thing. So that's where, again, time under tension, maybe doing negatives or eccentrics, isometrics, different pauses, things like that.
What did you mean by manipulate the load?
Well, in terms of like, you can do drop sets. You can basically push it however you want.
Oh, I thought I was actually trying to get you to say like where you're holding it. So offset.
Oh,
and
all right,
stuff
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
I thought that's what you meant by manipulate.
You can do like manipulate it in obviously numerous ways. So yeah, you can do, there's times where, we used to do barbell front squats. Well, then, wrist issues, things like that. It's like, all right, well, then we start doing front rack. Well, somebody can't do front rack, then it's goblet, or we, sometimes with the sandbags, we'll do a Zercher squat. So there's all sorts of offset, fireman carry, like a bunch of different ways you can manipulate the load. But yeah.
We basically dress up a bunch of the fundamental movement patterns.
Yes.
Yeah.
When we're plateauing, it's really important to just maybe switch something up. If you've been doing the same thing for 6, 7, 8 months, I know I've trained so many people who come to me and they're like, I've been doing the same 3 workouts for the last 5 years and I haven't gotten any better at them. You probably need to mix up that workout. There's only so many different ways to exercise. Like we can break it up into very few number of movements, like an overhead press, a pull, a push, leg extension or a knee focused exercise, and a hip hinge. Like that's pretty much the bulk of all workouts. So there's just so many ways you can do any of that, but there's a lot of manipulations with the weights, the time under tension, how long you're spending in that exercise, the repetitions. Mixing up some of those factors will help you break through that plateau and also be a little bit more creative. Or if your plateau is because you're switching up the exercise or your workouts every single day, you're not giving yourself that same amount of time to develop the skills and to develop the strength on those specific movements. You're just being too all over the place.
You also only have so much potential as a human.
Yeah.
So like,
What do you mean?
That's not a very nice thing to say.
That's not what I was told.
there's a
I'm
reason.
unlimited.
There's a reason
I'm
that
still
I wear
gonna be
the
president
Eeyore
and an
costume
astronaut.
up there. Yeah. No, but you, if you're just able to increase the weight on whatever exercise or whatever every single week for infinity, then you're just going to be, hitting these crazy numbers that nobody else has ever hit. So obviously, we talked about at the beginning where there's some neural components, there's also motor unit recruitment. But once you hit a certain point, those strength gains, you're working harder for smaller and more minimal gains as you reach closer and closer to your potential. So a plateau isn't necessarily, might not even be a plateau, really. It might seemingly be a plateau. It also might be something that's lacking in your programming. You know, like Keegan said, you might need to switch it up. We talked about why power and some of the other things that we work on are important and complement strength. You know, Westside Barbell, they train the strongest people in all the world. And if you look at some of their programming, from what I hear, I've never been invited to work at their gym or work out at their gym. It is invite only. But they do a strength day, and then they do those, I think it's like 2 days later, they do those same exercises at like 50% of the load because they're working on moving it quickly. So they are also working on power and absolute strength because they complement each other. So yeah, realizing your own potential, realizing that there's a lot more that goes into strength other than just pushing as much weight as possible. And we're not going to touch on the nutrition component, but that also goes into strength. So, you know, understanding again, there's an art to all of this.
Well,
and
there's also an important factor of like with the plateaus in terms of like, well, I'm not increasing strength. And it's like, again, going back to what we talked about early, are you taking an adequate rest? Are you recovering? Like, it may not be like, hey, you need to go hit it harder and manipulate stuff. It might be like your recovery is awful, and that is why you're not making progress. So it could be a numerous things, but you got to look at the whole picture. If you're not recovering, but you're working out, you know, you talk about buckets, not overflowing the buckets. Well, if your recovery is awful but you're working out great, it's like, well, all right, well, that's not going to get you to where you want to be. You got to make sure that they're even.
Go ahead.
With the likelihood of adults over 40, we're not near your physiological potential. Usually it's the potential of what you're willing to put into it. The more effort and energy you're putting into your training, the more likely you are to get better, but you don't have to continue to get better. Like if that's your thing, if you're trying to do a sport or train for whatever, like you can put more emphasis in it and you'll probably see more growth. So it's not necessarily just, I don't want people to just throw their hands up and been like, I've reached my potential, I'm just going to stop trying now. Because the likelihood of you are actually at your maximum potential, probably very unlikely.
And we're back to needing a coach. Well, actually, I do want to bring this up because it was in that Peter Attia thing. And they talk about relationships, and they kind of started off by talking about his wife, but they broadened it to just relationships in general. And so not only is Peak City Gym, you know, in my opinion, at the forefront of the way that we do our programming and some of that for, again, resilience training, not necessarily specific strength training. But he talks about how community and those relationships are important. You talked about accountability and why people sign up for you. I think at this gym in particular, people sign up for each other after a little while, and we're kind of just byproducts that they have to listen to every circuit.
We had a large group of members have
They're having brunch today.
Brunch today.
Right now, yeah.
Yes.
Brunch today now.
I just found that out recently.
So
and I was like,
none of
all
these
right.
people knew each other, I think, prior
None of them
to
came to
coming
class
here.
at 9 o'clock. Usually
And-
it's packed and there's like 3 people in class.
And they didn't know each other prior to coming to the gym, and now they go out for walks with each other and they go for brunch and do those things. Part of the longevity conversation is not just the strength, and we'll have another whole dedicated podcast to this, but it's also the relationships. And going to the gym is a really great way to build relationships of like-minded people.
Yeah, and then honestly, I mean, you know, they talk about you are who you hang out with, right? It's also a lot easier, you know, to accomplish things when you have a good support system. So, you know, especially if it's, and I'm not saying like this is the case, but I mean, if you don't have a good support system at home, you need to find a place where you can have people that are, you know, behind you, kind of helping push you forward. And that's where, you know, a lot of times that, you know, people come here for, you know, weight loss and some of that stuff. And then a lot of times they stay because they have such a good support system around them. They feel like, okay, I actually can do this. I can actually reach my goals. And it's not just like some hopeless effort.
We are working on something in the background to help facilitate that for people who are not in Apex, North Carolina. So stay tuned for that.
Teaser. Woohoo.
Thank y'all very much for joining us in today's podcast, having a conversation about strength, the common pitfalls and misconceptions people have around it, and kind of finding that art balance between strength, resistance training, and muscle and health overall. So I hope you guys learned a little something today. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe if you found value in this podcast, and we'll see you guys in the next one.